Chapter 1, The Broken Timepiece. Julian Hart had always been fascinated by clocks. Not the sleek, digital numbers of the modern world, but the intricate, delicate craftsmanship of old grandfather clocks, pocket watches, and antique timepieces that ticked with mechanical precision. So when he stumbled upon Elias Blackwood's clock shop in a forgotten corner of Ravenshollow, he felt an irresistible pull. The shop was wedged between two derelict buildings, its sign faded and hanging by a rusted chain. The window was fogged, but inside, Julian could see countless clocks, each of them ancient, their faces yellowed, their hands frozen at different times. A small brass bell jingled as he pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, tinged with the metallic scent of old gears and something subtler, something like decay. Behind the counter stood a man who looked as though he had stepped out of another century. Elias Blackwood was tall, gaunt, and wore a threadbare suit that might have once been fine. His eyes, however, were what caught Julian's attention, pale, almost translucent, like frosted glass. "You've come for a clock," Blackwood rasped, though Julian hadn't said a word. "I have just the piece for you." From beneath the counter, he produced a pocket watch unlike any Julian had ever seen. Its silver casing was tarnished, but the face was pristine. The hands ticked backward, each movement unnervingly smooth. "This one is special," Blackwood whispered. "But be warned, time is not always a friend." Julian, captivated, bought the watch without hesitation. That night, the ticking began. But it wasn't just ticking. It whispered. Chapter 2, The Whispering Hours. At first, Julian thought it was his imagination. A trick of the mind after a long day. But as the nights passed, the whispers grew louder. They came only at midnight, when the world outside was silent and still. The voice was soft, like the rustle of leaves in the wind, but unmistakably there. "Turn it back," it murmured. "Turn it back, Julian." The words seeped into his dreams, twisting them into vivid, haunting visions. He saw faces he didn't recognize, pale, gaunt, with eyes as hollow as Blackwood's. They stared at him from the shadows, their mouths moving in silent pleas. During the day, Julian tried to shake the feeling, but the watch weighed heavy in his pocket, its backward ticking a constant reminder that something was wrong. And then he noticed the changes. Shadows in his apartment lingered longer than they should. Reflections in mirrors didn't quite match his movements. And time itself seemed to stutter, his morning coffee still steaming after an hour, the sun pausing unnaturally in the sky. But the worst part was the face he began to see. In every reflective surface, the mirror, his window, even the polished surface of the watch, there it was, a gaunt, hollow-eyed version of himself, mouthing the same words. "Turn it back." Chapter 3, The Frozen Hour. Julian became obsessed. He scoured books and old town records, trying to find any mention of Elias Blackwood and his cursed clocks. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. Blackwood had been a renowned clockmaker in the late 1800s, famous for creating timepieces of unmatched beauty and precision. But he was also infamous for something else. Every person who purchased a clock from him met a gruesome, untimely fate. They disappeared, leaving behind only their clocks, always ticking backward. Blackwood himself vanished mysteriously in 1893, his shop closing overnight. But Julian had found that shop, or rather, it had found him. Desperate, he tried to get rid of the watch. He threw it into the river, smashed it with a hammer, even tried burning it. But every morning, it was back on his nightstand, ticking backward, pristine as ever. And each night, the whispers grew more insistent. "The hour is near, Julian. Turn it back, or be lost." One night, as the clock struck midnight, the ticking stopped altogether. Silence pressed against his ears like a weight. And then, from the shadows, he stepped out. It was Julian, but not. His reflection had become real, standing in his room with hollow eyes and a twisted grin. "Time's up," it whispered. Chapter 4, The Clockmaker's Price. Julian awoke to find himself in the clock shop. but it wasn't the dusty, abandoned shop he remembered. It was alive, vibrant with the steady ticking of hundreds of clocks. The air was thick with the metallic scent of oil and brass. And behind the counter stood Elias Blackwood. But now, Julian could see him for what he truly was. His face was gaunt, his skin stretched thin over sharp bones, and his eyes were hollow sockets, glowing faintly with a sickly blue light. "You didn't listen," Blackwood crooned. "You let the hour pass. Now, you belong to me." Julian tried to run, but his legs refused to move. The clocks around him began to tick louder, faster, until the sound was a deafening roar. "Time takes everything," Blackwood whispered. "But with me, it never truly ends." Julian felt his body being pulled apart, stretched thin like taffy as the clocks consumed him. His vision blurred, and the last thing he saw was his reflection in the glass, his hollow-eyed double, grinning as it took his place in the real world. Chapter 5: The New Keeper of Time. The next morning, the townsfolk of Ravenshollow noticed something odd. A new shop had appeared where there was once only an empty alley. Its sign was fresh, the brass bell above the door gleaming in the morning sun. Julian Hart's Clock Shop. Inside, the shelves were lined with beautiful, intricate timepieces, each ticking backward in perfect harmony. And behind the counter stood Julian, or what looked like Julian. His eyes were pale, almost translucent, and his smile never quite reached his hollow gaze. When the first customer entered, Julian greeted them with a soft, knowing smile. "You've come for a clock, he whispered. I have just the piece for you." And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the shop, a faint whisper echoed. "Turn it back."